Good morning and welcome to the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners Policy Session for June 5th, 2022. County Administrator Gary Schmidt, would you please introduce the first item?
Yes, Chair Smith. First, today Commissioner Savas is out of the office and Commissioner Fisher is at an Association of Oregon Counties event. So we just have 3 commissioners today, but we still have a quorum. First policy session is annual review of solid waste collection service, proposed fee increase. We have from our Transportation and Development, Sustainability and Solid Waste Program staff, Dan Johnson is the Director of Transportation and Development. Cheryl Bell is the Assistant Director of Transportation and Development. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much. We are pleased to be back in front of you today to talk about the results of our annual assessment of garbage and recycling fees. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Cheryl Bell to give you the summary to date, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. We have the experts in the room. Should more technical questions come forward, we would be happy to answer any of those that you may have. So with that, Cheryl.
Well, good morning, Chair Smith and Commissioners. We are here to share with you the results of the annual review of our solid waste collection fees and present the Solid Waste Commission's recommended action based upon this review. Sustainability and Solid Waste Program, which is part of Transportation and Development, is responsible for managing the county's solid waste collection system, and this includes the annual review of the production records of the 7 companies holding board-approved solid waste collection franchises. The purpose of this review, which is conducted with the assistance of a contracted CPA, is to ensure solid waste collection services are provided to residents and businesses safely, cost-effectively, efficiently, and in a way that supports recovering materials from the system. The results of the review are used to establish the fees charged for the variety of services the county requires our franchise collectors to offer and ensure a fair rate of return for our collectors. During the annual fee review, franchisees submit detailed reports, which are reviewed by staff and the contracted CPA, and we evaluate costs and test the impact of known costs and potential fee increases or decreases on the operating margin for each service zone and the system as a whole. This review includes an assessment of appropriate operating margins. The county's practice, which is consistent with other communities in Oregon, is to set fees at a level that targets a 10% operating margin with an acceptable range of 8 to 12%. So 8 at the low end, 12 at the high, and we try to target that 10% in the middle. This year, the known and measurable cost increases included in our 2022 calculations are a 2.2% increase in driver labor costs, 5% increase in health expenses for administrative workers, 58% increase in fuel, and an increase to the Metro tip fee on disposed waste, which will be effective July 1, 2022, representing a 7.1% increase to disposal costs over the current fiscal year. This year's review also identified a significant increase in the cost to purchase drop boxes, and this is included in the review in front of you. So this brings us to results and the Solid Waste Commission recommendation. When the known and measurable costs for 2021 were considered, the review showed that the operating margins were just above the range, so a little above that 12%. With the margin being above the range, the only fee increase proposed for regular residential and commercial garbage collection fees is to account for the increase to the Metro tip fee for disposable waste. The Solid Waste Commission, which is the county's formal body advisory body reflecting public participation in managing the solid waste system, met on May 12th, 2022 to consider the annual review. The commission voted to accept the review and recommended this proposed fee increase based on the known and measurable cost of only the tip fee be forwarded to the board for your consideration. And this is presented as option 2 in your packet for you today. So once again, this option is to increase regular residential and commercial garbage collection fees only to account for the increase in the Metro disposal costs. If the proposed fee increase is approved, the total system county estimated operating margin will be 11.41%, so just slightly below that 12% upper range. It's important to note some additional considerations that went into the Solid Waste Commission recommending a fee increase. First, following the fee methodology that was adopted by Metro, it's projected for 2023 disposal costs will increase 7 to 8%. Doing an increase this year keeps fees in alignment with disposal cost increases as they occur and helps avoid a more significant increase later. This is really a key factor for the Solid Waste Commission in looking at avoiding doing incremental increases rather than a large increase in the future. Additionally, there are costs anticipated for 2022 that cannot be reliably estimated at this time. These include increased costs for implementing a food waste collection rising costs in processing recyclables, and there were a number of planned truck replacements for 2021 that, because of supply chain, which we're all experiencing, didn't occur. So there will be some depreciation costs for new equipment showing up disproportionately in 2022. So all of these additional factors, while they couldn't be modeled, were taken into consideration by the Solid Waste Commission. If the board approves a fee increase, the action will result in 55-cent per month increase to a customer with weekly collection of a 35-gallon roll cart, so your typical roll cart you see at the curb. 55 cents per yard for commercial container service, and a monthly rental fee for drop box will increase for the first time in 10 years by $20 a month to account for increased cost to purchase and provide drop boxes. As you can imagine, over 10 years and the cost of steel, it's increased significantly, and this cost is to true up the cost for providing the drop boxes. So that brings us to the options for the board's consideration today. Option 1 is maintain fees at current levels until next year's annual fee review. If the board chooses option 1 and no fee increase is enacted, the estimated 2022 margin for the entire system will be 10.68%, so still within the target range. Approve option number 2, which is the Solid Waste Commission's recommendation, is approve a fee increase effective July 1, 2022, as approved and recommended by the Solid Waste Commission. And option 3 is propose an alternate to the proposed increase here in this session. So with that, we will rest our presentation and support you in your questions and deliberations. And as Dan noted, we do have the experts sitting in the audience who know way more about this analysis than either of us do. So we'd be happy to help.
Thank you, Cheryl and Dan, for your presentation today. I have a few questions, and my commissioners may have questions as well. What is the vote from the Solid Waste Commission for this to move forward?
Believe it was all in favor and 1 abstaining.
Okay, great. So I see I'm just looking, did a quick look-see on the residential, the urban and the rural residential, and the rates will increase anywhere from 90 cents to $1.35. Is that per month? Your increases, they're per month, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And some of us are billed every 2 months for that, just to be a point of clarification. Okay. As you know, I'm not one to support fee increases. And so I've had some talk with the local Clackamas County haulers and what type of business challenges they're facing in light of inflation and increased fuel costs. And I reached out to them and I said, do you know about this? And they said, yes. Do you support it? They said yes. They need some relief in increased fees so they can continue to pay the increased fuel costs, which this increase will not cover the increases that they're looking at. And so I said, I don't vote for this, but I will if you want me to. And overwhelmingly, they said, yes, we need this. So I'm inclined to vote for this today because overall, the inflation is racking a lot of our businesses. These haulers cannot go out and raise fees on their own, as maybe as independent trucker can. They're regulated, okay? So that's my justification for allowing this increase to go through. We have made other adjustments at the county level in areas that we have control over. Most areas we do not have control over. One of the biggest is we recognize our employees are all facing increased inflation costs in their home budgets, in their food, in their fuel costs to drive to work, and every time they turn around, and a COLA increase was given this year to them as well. Yes, that's costly on us. This, however, is passed on. And I do agree with fee increases. They need to be incremental every year, or all of a sudden in 10 years, you're looking at this huge infrastructure failure, this huge infrastructure costs that you can't possibly recover. So with that in mind, I'm inclined to support this today, and I'm going to allow my other commissioners to weigh in on this too. Commissioner Scholl.
Good morning, Dan and Cheryl. I appreciate your responsibility in maintaining the county's integrated solid waste system. I also appreciate the fact that you have the Solid Waste Commission advising you on what they think needs to be done in the way of changes to franchise fees or not franchise fees, but pickup fees. Maintaining an uninterrupted service to the county residents and businesses is very critical. And to do that, we need to make sure that this margin is balanced to protect the ratepayers, moms and dads out there and putting their garbage out this morning like I did, and businesses that have to pay for the big dumpsters. So this looks to me like it's reasonable. The 11.41 margin, if we should approve this increase this morning, that's based on current fuel. You know, I remember a year ago, diesel was about $2.80, and I got fuel yesterday, and I noticed it was $6 something, over $6 for diesel. So this 11.4, this based on today's fuel prices, right? So in 6 months, that 11.4 might be down a little bit, correct?
Correct.
I see a gentleman back here shaking his head. So am I right?
That's correct.
Okay, so, all right, thank you. That answers my question on that. Thank
The
you very
adjustments that you're seeing from the Solid Waste Commission's recommendation are measured. And as you know, as you are dealing with these economic pressures across all the projects you're dealing with right now, it's a measured step. And then we'll have to assess it again next year and see what other challenges they're facing.
Yeah, we review things yearly, and that's fair. We're trying to be as fair and accommodating as possible. Commissioner Schrader?
Yeah, I've been through a number of these, as you know, more than I can count. And I have always followed the recommendation of the Waste Commission because they are the people in the business. And they really are a big part of what we do in sustainability in this county and have been great partners through the years. And as much as none of us likes to do fee increases, costs go up, I feel very comfortable that the majority, near unanimous decision of the Waste Commission, that I feel very comfortable moving ahead with this. And Chair, would you like a motion?
I would like a motion.
I move we approve of a fee increase effective July 1st, 2022, and as approved and recommended by the Solid Waste Commission.
Seconded.
The motion has been made by Commissioner Schrader, yes, to approve this increase by the Solid Waste Commission and approved and seconded by Commissioner Shaw. Any further discussion? Yes, Mark?
Chair Smith, I got to share this story with you. When I was stationed on the East Coast years ago, I visited New York City at a time when the garbage haulers went on strike. Mm-hmm. That could never happen in this county, could it, Cheryl? I'm just teasing you.
Yeah.
We don't want to even envision that.
Oh, man. Oh. I'll just stay home those days. Any other comments? Tony, please take the poll.
Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 3-0. Thank you very much for coming forward and doing hard work on this.
Thank you.
Yep, Gary, what's up next?
Next policy session is County Code Proposed Revisions. Stephen Madcourt, County Council, will present.
Good morning, Gary, Tony, and Commissioners. I am not presenting this morning. This is Scott Seco and Jeffrey Munns, and I texted them telling them that they better hurry. But what we have before you,
Stephen, I can interrupt. We are 15 minutes early.
they should be here anyway.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Staff are instructed to be here
Yeah,
15
no, they
minutes
should be
early,
here,
so
yeah.
go ahead, Stephen.
So what you have before you is a proposal for a first reading, take it to a public hearing, a first reading on a number of code changes. First and foremost is a project that has been in the works for over 2 years, and that is to make our code gender neutral, to get rid of the he's and the she's and things along those lines, to bring it into the modern era, essentially. We also had it ran by our EDI folks to make sure that it had no implicit or explicit bias within the code itself. And so there are corrections in there as well, and that is the entire code itself. So you have a lot of volume in front of you. But what you do have, the version you have in front of you is an abbreviated version. So the chair pointed out there are some pages missing. That was done for efficiency and consolidation purposes. If it goes to a first reading, you're going to get the entire thing, because that's how we do legislation. You have the entire packet, the existing code, the removed areas would be stricken out, and the added areas would be underlined or redlined. That's how legislation is done, so you're going to get the whole packet. So in addition to the gender neutral component, there is also a removal from exclusion from county buildings component in there as well, which is code language that has been in the works for, geez, I don't know, maybe even 6 years. We had proposed this years ago, and the board didn't have the appetite at that point, so we did a person in charge policy instead, where a person in charge could ask a unruly, disruptive member of the public to leave the building, and if they didn't, they could be subject to a criminal trespass charge. That's consistent with state law. What this does, though, this proposal, it basically codifies that process, and it says the county administrator, the sheriff, the county council, the chief deputies, facilities manager, those are folks who have the ability to exclude or disruptive individuals, and it defines what disruption is. It's defacing the public property, it's interfering with government operations, it's fights, it's altercations, it's bad conduct. It's not going to be speech related, it's not going to be something that we regularly tolerate. It's going to be for conduct that is an absolutely disruptive. So that would codify that component of things. We also have a section in there on, gentlemen, come on up, on code enforcement and chronic nuisance. And here to take that will be Jeff Munns and Scott Seco.
Welcome, gentlemen. Who wants to go first? Please introduce yourself.
I'm Jeffrey Munns, Assistant County Counsel, and I'll talk about the code enforcement changes to Chapter 207. So there's some cleanup work to this section where we're changing some of the titles, adding some other components to really help the process in the code mirror what is being done in practice. And so, sorry, ran up the stairs.
That's all right.
So we've got the statement of facts section, so you can change to something called an allegation letter. So the idea being an allegation is made or a complaint, staff sends a letter after reviewing the facts, after reviewing the complaint, a letter to the person who owns the property. Instead of this current section called Statement of Facts, it's kind of an internal formal statement that isn't really useful. Instead, sending them a letter and saying, this is what we've heard, please contact us with more information. So that's a change there that helps work better with the process. And it follows into the next section, which is a sufficiency of evidence section, allowing for, once there's sufficient evidence, they can move forward with code, but also changing this to allow some discretion for the board to set priorities as far as what would get enforced. And then the next section is a violation letter, which in code enforcement, if the property owner does not abate the violations or correct the problems, then a formal letter goes out and say, look, you're in violation, please remedy this in so many days, we'll send you a citation and move the process forward. So that again cleans that up. And then we have a section called administrative compliance fee, just changing this section a little bit so that it works better with letting people know that the administrative compliance fee will not end until the county can verify this. This has been a problem where somebody says, look, I cleaned it up 6 months ago. But we've been sending a letter every month and you haven't contacted us, so we didn't know. So instead, once they tell us they've cleaned it up, we'll go out and verify it. Then the administrative compliance fee would no longer continue to be accrued.
Is there an extra cost to any of this?
No extra costs,
Okay.
just simply changing the process so it works better for operations for code enforcement and clearer communication with the public.
Great. Thank
And then finally, we are adding changing the citation and forfeiture section to add an enabling provision to have the citations be in the appendix to the county code. So this had been adopted in 2003 by resolution by the board, but had not been included in the actual appendix to the county code. And so this just cleans up that, so that both the code and the appendix are consistent with the direction from the board and practice. And so then, the next section also concerns code enforcement called chronic nuisance. And there's a number of changes in here. One is a change to amend the code to clarify that a violation of unlawful use of controlled substances remains a nuisance activity. This is because of recent legislation that's lowered the criminality of certain use, personal use and possession of controlled substances from a crime to a violation. So just clarifying that a violation is still a nuisance activity. And then another change is that currently in the chronic nuisance section of the code, it's typically enforced at the sheriff's office. And that's typically how it still continues, but we do have a number of these properties where it's not criminal activity that's causing it to be a chronic nuisance, but simply a lot of code enforcement violations. We have some of these, camps essentially that get established, and even if there's not enough criminal activity documented, we have a lot of other violations, and then we can move forward with the building official initiating the process. So building official is inserted into this chapter in addition to the sheriff's office or the sheriff as the official who can initiate a chronic nuisance process. And so then we have a cleanup section in that section to allow for more clearer notice of this by just mailing the notices first-class mail, because a lot of things that would get registered to some of these individuals just get returned. So first-class mail people typically get, they don't refuse it. And then other changes to this section would be a summary closure section, provides clearer criteria for proceeding with a case directly into circuit court and seeking a temporary restraining order. Entering closed property is changed to authorize criminal trespass as a remedy when somebody violates an order closing the property. And then we're removing the attorney fee clause from this section because the county is rarely awarded attorney's fees. Whenever you have a clause like that, if we can be awarded attorney's fees, so can the other party that we're trying to enforce against. And so instead of subjecting the county to potential attorney fee exposure if there was a problem, we're just removing it as a remedy for ourselves because we're rarely awarded it anyway. And so with that,
Before we continue, do any commissioners have questions regarding this section of the code? Martha, you okay? Yep. Thank you very much. Please continue.
Sure. All right, moving right along then. I guess, first of all, a question for the chair and for the board. When we came in, Stephen Madcour was describing the exclusions of persons from county buildings. I don't know if that's something that you would like more information on, more specifics. I'm happy to cover that. But essentially what we're doing with the exclusion, just to add a little bit more detail there, is to ensure that the county exclusion procedures, first of all, they're codified in the county code, and second of all, that they are compliant with due process requirements. So specifically and importantly there is the provision that somebody who is excluded can appeal that to the county administrator, and then the county administrator would have the final say for the county. There would be further appeal processes to circuit court, but ensuring that someone has the ability to at least appeal that decision is important for due process, and also just clarifying the types of behaviors, the types of conduct that would subject someone to exclusion. And again, being careful to point out that these are due to behavior, not protected First Amendment, content-based speech. This is about behavior that disrupts county functioning, so clarifying that. So we would need to make sure with this that we're steering clear of any potential pitfalls and honoring constitutional protections. So those are really kind of the key takeaways there. Okay. Happy to answer any questions if there are, but as Stephen mentioned, that's something that's...
And do these people get a warning before they're removed?
There's discretion to the individuals who have authority within the county to exclude, and it would depend on the circumstances. If someone is literally getting in a fist fight, that may be a situation where there's no warning. It's just, you're out of here.
And it says disruption of county business. Would that include this hearing on a business day when there's a crowd in the office, in this room, and they're shouting down the speakers at the dais?
It would. The exclusion policy is, the exclusion procedures are directed at individuals. So I think if you're talking about a group, the best option might just be to end the meeting.
And I've done that, but
Sure.
this could be full of people, and there's one person in the corner, for instance, that's heckling, that's carrying on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. And you would want to consider then the severity of the conduct in the duration of the exclusion. So the exclusions would range from 7 days being a minimum up to a year.
And who
There
makes that decision?
That would be the person in charge. So there's discretion to whoever the official is that's making that decision.
And it would
to-
not be the commissioners sitting at this dais making that decision. It would be the person in charge.
Right. There's a list of people, of designees who have authority. There could be consultation, right? There could be input from commissioners, but essentially, as long as the exclusion is proportional to the offense, so to speak, then that would be fine. And as long as there is then that additional ability to appeal to the county administrator, then we're going to be protected from a due process standpoint.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Please continue.
Sure. So that really sums up the highlights for the exclusion process, unless there's further questions on that.
Seeing none, go ahead.
Okay, another proposed change again, and this is just kind of part of, I refer to it as kind of our omnibus policy changes. These are things, some of them that have been being looked at for several years. One of the more recent issues to come up is in Chapter 2.09, County Administrator Authority, and there has been a request to change that, to add authority to the administrator to be the person with authority over signage and flags at all county buildings and county property. And that is to ensure uniformity across the county and also to make sure that it's clear who the decision maker is as to those things. So things like what types of flags would be flown, what type of signage would be displayed. All of that is pertinent, particularly in light of a recent U.S. Supreme Court decision involving the city of Boston and their flag flying policy. So this would all be consistent with that decision and also just be clear as to who would be making those decisions.
Thank you.
We have also, let's see, we got a little bit out of order, so I just need to figure out what we covered. Exclusions we've covered. And then I think the last major issue is something that Stephen was also alluding to, and that is the bias and gender neutrality revisions. We do have here also Cindy Becker and Martine Koblenz from Diversity and Equity, and they have been involved in this process. This is something that resulted from a board order back in 2020, where staff was directed to review the code for bias, any bias or and for gender neutrality. So this has been a work in progress. Initially, County Council looked at the code for facial bias, and when I say facial bias, what I'm referring to is any type of bias that appears on the face of the text. So something that you can just look at right in the black and white and say there are biases there or inequalities. And so that was kind of the initial look. Subsequent to that, the other departments were then brought in to try to evaluate whether or not there was also what we would call disparate impacts. That's kind of a legal term. And what that means is something that may look neutral on its face might still have unintended inequitable impacts on certain groups. So that was something that was examined as well. However, what we found as far as the disparate impacts is the reality is we just don't have the data to really know, because this code is enforced by obviously a variety of county departments, and we would rely on those departments to really dive in to keep stats, monitor whether there's impacts, whether they see that type of thing, and that just hasn't occurred. So if that's something that this board would like to occur, it's probably going to require direction from the board and from county administration for some type of, objective statistical measurements by departments. And so that's a much bigger process. So we did look at that, but in the end, we ended up determining that we just didn't have the data and it would be just kind of guesswork, and we didn't want to make decisions based on that, or rather recommend decisions based on that.
Scott, I see Martine Koblenz in the back and Cindy Becker. Do any of you two care to make a comment regarding bias and disparate data? Would you both please come forward, and then Scott and Jeff will return to your presentation. Go ahead. Whoever wants to go first, please identify yourself.
Only because I drove up for this, and as much as I love to listen to county council, I could do that from home. Anyway, I just want to let you know what the process is. Martine and Rod Cook and I spearheaded this process. We involved people from EDICT and people from, is it LEDIC?
So the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Council, which is the Employee Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and then the community one, the Leaders of Equity, Diversity, and
So
Inclusion.
we split it up into 3 teams, and we went through all of the code. And there were a few things that stood out, but really very few in terms of facial bias.
Good.
But what we found was a lot of questions. The issue is implementation. The code and face value looks fine in most cases, but the key is implementation. Until you see the data in terms of how the code is implemented, how it impacts or not people of color, people living in poverty, people with disabilities, until you have that data, you don't know if there's a problem with the code. We think there's a problem with some of the code, but until we have the data, we don't know. For example, in terms of translation and interpretation, if you're sending things to people in English and either A, they don't speak English, or they don't have a mailbox, and there are time frames around people responding, it looks like it could be a problem, but we don't have the data. And so we believe that the next step, as Scott talked about, is really, and through Gary, talking with the departments about, you need to start collecting the data about how your code is implemented. So how it's impacting people. Is it impacting people? The same thing with your policies. Again, they're well-intended, and on face value, they may seem fine, but until you're actually looking at the people who are affected by that policy, you don't know if there is bias. Martine, you want?
Yeah, I think this would be a long-term, ongoing process, working collaboratively with the departments, because it will take time to collect the data for the intention of looking at the code. And I think it's going to be more so implementation, which is departmental policies, looking at how their procedures and policies might be impacting the communities they're serving.
So what is the impact to the departments on collecting this data? This is yet another duty for them to perform. I would think there'd be a financial cost as well. So are you saying that this data accumulation is automatically going to be in process if we pass this code today? Because I don't see that in there.
No, so
And
we're not-
Gary, what is the process for the data collection?
Right, we're not asking you to approve this today, Commissioners. We're just saying that's the next step that we
Because
come
we
back
have
to
2
it.
public hearings.
Right.
Yes, but in our public hearings and today, we're just approving the code. We are not asking for the departments to go out with the data collection for future implementation and study. I think that's a whole nother policy issue that has a cost attached to it.
That's right. So we're saying the code as is. We're not recommending any more changes than the facial bias changes.
But you did explain disparate impacts and need to be codified in data collection. I understand that, and thank you for that explanation. Commissioner Schrader.
Yeah, I just want to thank both of you for the work that you're doing here. I think it's really important work. I think that, again, we always have to look out for costs, but I really think this lands squarely. My suggestion would be under the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion to really take the lead, right, Gary? And would am I on point with that, to collect the data?
Yes,
Yeah.
they would work with departments.
Yeah.
Again, we're not asking you to approve this today, Commissioners. We're just telling you this is the next step. We'll come back to you at a future policy
Okay, good.
discussion about implementing that phase of this.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from the presenters? Thank you very much for this work. I mean, this is just a ton of work represented, like you say, by many people in the county, and we do appreciate it very much. We're going to ask Jeff and Scott from County Council, please, to come up. And Scott, do you need to finish, or continue, I mean?
Sure, thank you. And I think you anticipated where we're going with this, in that I think we have covered now all the proposed changes. The ask today is simply that the board move this forward to a public hearing. It will require 2 public hearings, obviously, for the ordinance to be adopted with these omnibus proposed changes, and we would ask you to move forward to those hearings and proceed as recommended.
I am so inclined to make that motion today and vote on it. However, I do have an addition that I would like to be made in Chapter 6.03 under emergency declarations. I have some language I'm going to read into the record that's going to require however procedure we go ahead on this. I run it by Stephen Madcore, and I'm going to recite the language now. Regarding elected officials of Clackamas County, in the event management duties are not performed within the scope of said elected officials' scope of work or timeline set forth in statute, an emergency is declared by the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners, allowing for county administration to assume said duties under the direction of the BCC for completion of identified tasks. I have sent that language over to Stephen Madcore. Would you like to come forward and comment on that, or are you okay for now?
I shared that, Chair, with Jeff and Scott, and I think they're able to comment on it as well.
Would you like to comment on that?
Sure, yeah, thank you, Chair. The ask today from council is that the board move forward with the changes as proposed. As to the additional changes proposed by the chair, those are certainly something that we can look at. I think there are some legal issues that need to be examined
I think we
further.
need to consider that, putting it in the code as the motion that I'm making today. You clean up the legal issues, and by the time we have the next hearing, language of this language or similar language will be in our emergency declaration section.
Chair, I think we need to do some legal research on that section, because in that language, what it does essentially is have the county commission take over the role, the functions of a separately elected official. I think that's something that we need to clarify to ensure that you're on solid legal ground before you do so. And that's the work that we will do, and get you a clear answer on that question. But I think it's something that we need to be careful that we do it properly, and we don't create an issue for the commission moving forward.
Well, we've already done it with our elections, somewhat. So what I'm asking for is the fact that the actions we've already taken is supported by law and our county code, and that's going to be my argument moving forward on this.
I think the actions we've already taken have been in having Gary sworn in as a,
And then he was
official.
fired the next day, so that doesn't work. He was sworn in one day and fired the next day. Any other objections, gentlemen?
No objections. We're just like, our role is to give you good legal advice, and I think we need some time
Make
to
sure
look
it's
into
in the
that.
code going forward. Commissioner Schrader?
I do support this because I see the necessity of some of the emergencies that we're having to cope with. And my intention would be with this kind of ability to take these kinds of actions, that it's not abused or misused, that it really is an emergency, and that, again, we do it in consultation. It's a very serious thing to do, and we do it in consultation with our administrator and the rest of our colleagues here. Chair Smith wants it included. However, Chair Smith, I will move forward with language, but I do think it's a wise idea to let the legal eagles here just make sure we're crossing every T and dotting any I. I don't think it's saying no. I think it's like, okay, within the legalese of God knows the world we live in, as a entity that consistently has multiple lawsuits from everybody for one reason or another, just to at least let them do an analysis. But I agree that language of this kind is really necessary based on what we faced recently here. No disparaging anyone, but we really did have to, as you know, take over functions in order to make sure things happened in a timely manner. So if you could help us with this, that would be great. But I do think we need some kind of language. And Chair, give them a chance to
Oh, I will.
look at it.
I'm
Yeah.
not saying no. I'm making sure that they understand how serious I am about this.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to support. Well, I am supporting you with this, but I also want to make sure that our legal eagles here, we're not getting ourselves into hot water. Is that right, gentlemen?
Correct, and just to respond to the chair, the main goal is to ensure that we're not setting ourselves up with language that would be potentially contrary to state law, because the clerk's position is created by state law. Chapter 401 that has the emergency authority is created by state law. So we just need to make sure we do it in a way that's
I'm
consistent
well
with state law.
aware of the statutes regarding the problem that was presented to us and the actions that we wanted to take. And every time I turned around, there was a statute that kept us performing the duties on time. And I want to change. And I will be at the legislature with proposed legislation along with the Secretary of State on further duties and sidebars to be included, because I do think the Oregon revised statutes in this state regarding elections are very outdated and antiquated, and they do not allow for the use of new technology, systems that break down. They do not allow for the use of the situation that was presented to us on hand duplication was astronomical. We were stuck because of really old revised statutes. But on this, I want to move forward on this. Commissioner Scholl.
Everything in government is like pushing a overweight pachyderm up a slippery, muddy bank. Nothing's easy. I've got a question on process. If we go ahead with your proposed revisions to the code, between now and the first public hearing, whenever that might be, would you have time to do a legal scrub on Chair Smith's recommendations, and then have this go to the first public hearing, have that briefed at that hearing, and then maybe go to the second public hearing with a modified recommended changes?
Yes, all of that's possible. Another thing that's in our ordinance as it's drafted right now would be an emergency clause, that if you unanimously passed it at the first public hearing and declared an emergency, it could be enacted and active immediately at that time. And that's another option that is in this draft ordinance. So yes, we can do the research and get you an answer. But then how the board decides to move forward, it could either be done as an emergency in one hearing, or it could be done in two public hearings and adopted, and it could be modified and then read, and Chapter 203 of the ORS allows for that. So yes, we can be flexible and get you the answers you need.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you scrubbing that wording to make sure it's going to fly. So we're paying you guys at least $5 an hour for your work, so we want to get your money's worth out of you. Okay?
So make appointment in my office to confer with me when you have reached a conclusion on this and language that we will move forward on. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other presentations on this today? Gary, do I need a motion?
If you would, yes, a motion to move forward to the first public hearing, please.
Okay, commissioners?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Scholl has moved that we move forward on a public hearing for the code changes as presented to us. Commissioner Schrader has seconded that motion. Commissioners, evidently this document is 900 pages long, and we have been presented with an abbreviated version, but I understand the full text will be presented to us before that date, correct?
Correct. We part of the packet that would go to the
Okay, and it
business
will be
meeting.
an online packet, correct?
Correct.
Okay, all righty. Commissioner Scholl.
Wait, I was going to say, Chair Smith, one of the most exciting things I do is read the county code. It's so stimulating to read it. It's great fun.
I was scrolling through it, and I said, well, what happened on page 44? We're starting on and it's not completed yet. I go, what happened? What happened? And then they explained to me we were given the abbreviated version. Commissioner Schrader.
God forbid if I go to hell, they're going to put me somewhere where I have like books of code enforcement and stuff. I can't tell you how many times that we have revisited code enforcement. I'm looking at Dan over here, okay? Mr. Madcore, since 2003. And it's always been quite the activity. This one seems to be a little quicker and easier than other ones, I've got to tell you.
Yeah, this was a lot of work. I appreciate everybody involved doing this. I know it's taken a very long time. Thank you all for those who are listening out there. We will move forward. Gary, Tony, when is the public hearing scheduled for this?
Madam Chair, the public hearing is not presently scheduled. I would need to consult with council to ensure.
I think
they're
we have
ready.
some days open coming up. Yeah,
It'll be July at this
July,
point.
yeah, thank you. Tony, would you please take the poll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
Chair Smith,
Aye, motion passes 3-0. We will now consider this at a public hearing as soon as it can be scheduled. Thank you very much for coming forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Gary, what's up next?
The next policy session is statewide transportation improvement funds for fiscal years 2023-24 and 2024-25. We have our team from Health, Housing, Human Services to present. Teresa Christofferson, Administrative Services Manager, and Christina Babcock, Human Services Supervisor. Please come forward. And begin when you're ready, please.
Good morning, Chair Smith and Commissioners. Thank you very much for meeting with us today. We
Please
appreciate this
introduce-
opportunity.
You bet. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Teresa Christofferson. I'm the Administrative Services Manager for the Social Services Division.
And I'm Christina Babcock. I am a Human Services Supervisor and Transportation Lead.
Go ahead, thank you.
Thank you. We're here today to talk about the proposed statewide transportation improvement funds projects for the biennium beginning July of 2023 and ending June of 2025 for Clackamas County. 2 years ago, we met with you to review the projects for the current biennium, and we're now bringing the projects for the next biennium for your review and approval. To provide some background, House Bill 2017 was approved by the legislature in 2018. Along with other transportation infrastructure funding, it included a statewide payroll tax that supports the Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund, known as STIF or STIF, that is very specific to transit and transit operations. The original funding activities include service enhancement or improvement and planning efforts to improve public transit. Priorities include improving public transit for low-income households and students, low or no emissions buses, improving connections between communities, and reducing fragmentation between transit providers. During the last legislative session, the following changes were made. Recognizing that costs for transit are rising, but state and local funding has remained, or grant and local funding has remained flat, funds can be used to maintain existing services that prevent reduction or elimination of core transit services. This has been very important with the impacts of COVID and with economic conditions. It also provides stabilization for an existing program called the Special Transportation Fund, STF. STF has been used for local transportation programs that focus on the needs of seniors and persons with disabilities and is an essential component of providing comprehensive services, especially in our rural communities. The Special Transportation Fund has been in existence for over 20 years and is primarily funded by cigarette taxes along with a small amount from other fees. The good news is fewer people are smoking. The bad news is STF revenues have dropped off significantly in the last 10 to 15 years. The state has provided bridge funds from State General Fund to hold the STF program whole for the last few bienniums. But there was a decision made to put together an STF stabilization proposal that allows STIF funds to be used to added to the STF pool to stabilize those services for seniors and persons with disabilities. As we discuss the proposed projects, we have included the Clackamas County projects that have historically been funded with STF and contracted with Ride Connection, a nonprofit organization, as they'll now be included in this new STIF approval process. In the past, we've also requested a separate approval to apply, but again, now we're combining these processes all together. The Social Services Division of the Department of Health, Housing, and Human Services operates public transit and elderly and disabled transportation services for Clackamas County. Through our Transportation Reaching People program of paid and volunteer drivers and the network of senior centers, we have provided rides for seniors and persons with disabilities to access medical appointments, dialysis, and other life-sustaining medical treatments, meals, and grocery shopping for over 25 years. We also, since 2008, have operated the Mount Hood Express, which is a public transit service that provides service between Sandy Government Camp and Timberline. And we most recently have added 2 last-mile shuttles in Oregon City and in the Clackamas industrial area, providing local residents with service. Today, we're here to recommend projects for Clackamas County that are derived from existing plans and maintain, improve, and enhance services provided in our county. We partner very closely with the Department of Transportation and Development to identify eligible projects and to ensure they're compliant with existing plans. DTD assists with taking a lead role with planning projects identified in these plans while we manage the actual transit operations piece. So I'm going to turn it over to Christina. She's going to take you through an overview of the list of projects that we are recommending today, and she'll have some additional information about the funding resources that are going into them.
Okay, so you guys should all have a copy of a couple different things. The first thing I'm going to start with is the Excel spreadsheet that's colored. So you should have a blue and a green and a gray. It's called Proposed STIF Formula Projects. So these projects are broken down by color by type. And so if you look at the projects in the blue, all of those projects are associated with our public transportation services, Mount Hood Express, local service connections with other transit providers, planning a transit hub up in the government camp area, and some capital purchases to support the Mount Hood Express. The things in the green box are associated with our elderly and disabled transportation services. So that falls more under the category of what Teresa identified as our former STF projects that have now been combined with STIF. And then finally, the gray ones are ones that didn't fall in either bucket. Kind of a miscellaneous one, if you will. So some administrative costs, some technology upgrades for all of our different programs. Vehicle maintenance is always one of those things where we have funding for, but we never have enough funding. As costs rise, maintenance costs rise. As we have more vehicles, those rise. And then the other part of the spreadsheet is called Proposed Regional Coordination Projects. Regional coordination projects are a group of projects that are approved by the STIF Advisory Committee, and they're projects that help coordinate transportation services with both the QE, the qualified entity, which is TriMet, and then the other service providers in our area. So it's a portion of dollars that is carved out of TriMet's STIF formula dollars and provided to other transit providers to make local connections. And so on our list, you'll have a couple of our last mile shuttles that are already up and operating. So those have been approved in previous bienniums, and we're seeking to get approval to continue those. And there's another service that we're looking to add, which is bringing residents of Estacada into Clackamas Community College. They've been begging for that for years. And so that's partnering with the City of Sandy, SAM Operations, to bring that service to those residents. And then also, Clackamas Community College has an express shuttle that was expanded with STIF dollars to provide more evening service and more weekend service. So that's a pretty high-level overview. I'm more than willing to go into details if anyone on the board has some specific questions.
I'm sure my commissioners want to make some comments. Commissioner Schrader, you're up.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, you did answer most of my questions by going through this, because I was looking at it. The public transportation service provider seems to be mostly us. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Correct. That is filling in these gaps. And what I'm going to channel, not too much, but Commissioner Savis here just for a minute.
Go ahead.
Okay. So the committee meets twice to discuss the project of all the Clackamas County providers except TriMet. So basically, I think the biggest concern that consistently I've heard from my colleague is that there's deserts, transportation deserts. This is a fill-in, but we still have large gaps because of for whatever reason, TriNet has not been able to kind of close those gaps, particularly in East County. And I guess that's more of a statement than a question. And so basically, this is helping with a number of those gaps, but it is under the umbrella of social services, most of these transportation projects that I'm seeing. Is that correct?
Yeah, the operations of the projects are under social services at this point.
Thank you. I wish we, well, that's all I have to say, but I wish we had more pushback with TriMet, because they should be our partner in providing a number of these in a much more explicit way and giving us more money. But anyway, that's just my comment. Thank you.
I ditto that.
All right.
Commissioner Scholl.
Yes. Your spreadsheets look like you're providing a broad spectrum of programs to a lot of people. I made a note when I was reading through your briefing here this morning do these STIF projects provide the most bang for the buck for the most amount of people in Clackamas County? I kind of think that might be true, don't you? Do you agree?
I really believe that the services that we provide are certainly they're very important to the communities that we provide them to and the individuals that we're serving, and they are very cost-effective overall. Our cost per revenue hour is generally lower than, for example, a large transit company would or a large transit provider would have. So I do think that this is an economical way to provide service, and we work really hard at providing cost savings as much as we can.
And
You mentioned something about Sandy Area Metro, the little trolley. But just before that, you spoke about the need to provide transit from Estacada to Clackamas County or Clackamas Community College. How does Sam work with that?
So I'm actually going to return to your previous question that Teresa answered.
Okay.
So part of making sure that we're getting the most bang for the buck, and part of my job is to coordinate with these other transit providers, right? So we have Sandy Area Metro, Canby, South Clackamas Transit District, and SMART out of Wilsonville. And all of those systems are either transit districts or transit providers, and their cost per an hour is significantly lower than than TriMet, right? And so they have established systems, established drivers, vehicles, all that type of stuff and routes. And so we use some of our STIF formula dollars and primarily our regional coordination dollars, in this example, for Estacada to CCC, to partner with those transit providers to provide that service. So my job is to advocate for that service for Clackamas County. Estacada's been wanting for years to be able to get residents into Clackamas Community College. And then I work with the transit director in Sandy to help set up that route. So she already has a route that goes from Sandy to Estacada. And so now it's about extending that route from Estacada over Redland Road into Clackamas Community College.
And that route over Redland Road to the college, is that going to happen in this next fiscal year or not until 23-24?
23-25, that funding cycle is when we're requesting money.
Okay. One last comment. We have some folks out in Boring who are always complaining to me about the lack of transit to get from the Boring area to Sandy. Do you have any plan for helping those folks out?
So I actually worked with Andy Howell, the transit director out at Sandy, to encourage her to apply for regional coordination dollars to take a route from Sandy into Clackamas Town Center through Boring and Damascus. And that would also be in this same funding cycle. That's not on our list because I'm not going to be facilitating that per se. I play more of a background role in saying, hey, we need transit service here. What do you think about doing this? She says, that's great. I like that idea. It connects, there's a lot of reasons why it makes good sense, and I won't go into all the details, but that will be on her funding request for 23-25.
Okay, so you're going to do all that for $5,280,000 some change?
Well, Andy's is separate. Andy's out in Sandy is separate from mine. That Clackamas Town Center into Boring is separate. But yes, everything on our list for $5 million and some change is, best estimate of what things will cost as we continue to fight inflation and everything else and trying to find drivers and all the challenges with providing transportation in Clackamas County.
Well, good. Well, thanks for your work on this.
Yep.
You referred to the spreadsheets, blue, green, and then gray. And did I hear right? The items listed in gray do not have funding?
Let me rephrase. They don't fit into a green or blue bucket. They don't fit into those types of projects. So the gray projects are projects that have been identified for funding, but they're kind of miscellaneous items. So if you read through gray, one of the line items is technology upgrades. Those technology upgrades will be done with both our transportation programs, our public transportation programs, but also our E&D services. And then administrative costs talk about paying for my time. So it doesn't fall into the blue bucket or the green bucket, if you will. But there is funding identified for those.
Okay, good. I misunderstood that. Thank you for the clarification. It looked like totals are $4,009,688 for the listed items, which includes a program reserve of $458,855. And then we have a few other large ticket items on page 7. What is page 7 refer to?
Page 7 My pages aren't numbered, I don't think in the same way yours is. Is
Okay,
that
it's the proposed regional coordination projects, and the first one listed is Service Clackamas County College
Okay,
Express.
so those projects are the projects that are funded by the slice of money that's carved out from TriMet's STIF formula dollars and provided to the public transportation service providers to create projects that help connect into the TriMet district. And so if you look at those projects, Clackamas Community College Express operates somewhat within the TriMet Service District, and that project was to expand evening hours and weekend to provide more access to the college. Our last mile shuttles are all about connecting people to the TriMet Service District, whether it be the Clackamas Industrial Shuttle that operates out of the Clackamas Town Center or the Oregon City Shuttle that basically makes a loop around the city and connects at various points to TriMet. That new Estacada service is on that list. We're requesting money for that. And then on there are also purchases of vehicles to make those
Absolutely.
connections happen.
And I love the idea of a service from Sandy through Bourne, Damascus to the town center. That's just really great when that can be realized. Commissioners, any other comments or questions on this? I will accept a motion for approval.
I move that we confirm the project list as presented.
Seconded.
Commissioner Schrader has made the motion to review the project list and confirm the project list as presented. Commissioner Scholl has seconded the motion. Any further discussion? Tony, please take the poll.
Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 3-0. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you for your presentation today. It was very enlightening, and for all your work you're doing on this.
Thank you.
It makes me want to ride the bus.
Okay. Gary, what's up next?
That is your final session for today.
Hearing and seeing no business before this commission, we are adjourned.